Now I'm happy to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Robert Goldberg. Dr. Robert Goldberg is a guest professor here this semester at UVU, and we're really happy to have him here and sharing his expertise. Dr. Goldberg received his Ph.D. from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Among many other teaching awards, he received the Rosenblatt Prize for Excellence, the University of Utah's highest award in 2008. He's a visiting scholar at UVU this semester, and the title of his presentation is Conspiracy Thinking in 21st Century America. Dr. Goldberg.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Wendell, for inviting me to share my research. Thank you, Brigham, for all you're doing. I'm much more than I can see. Thank you all for coming, and again, thank the folks at home for tuning in. My talk today concerns the transgressive nature of conspiracy theories. That is, how do conspiracy theories challenge, reject, and transgress traditional and commonly accepted norms and values and behaviors? How do conspiracy theories weaken the faith and trust we have in our core institutions? As you will see, this transgression that we're going to talk about today is both in style and in message. Now, at the same time, in their challenges, conspiracy theories pose alternatives. Alternatives to replace values, replace norms, replace behaviors, and to reshape American society. So I'm going to suggest that in transgression, we can see both the negative and the positive nature and aspects of conspiracy theories. To support my arguments today, I'm going to provide a foundation that lays out an understanding of conspiracy theories. What are they? What do they seek? Why do people believe? This foundation is in part historical. What in our past fosters and nurtures conspiracy thinking? And how has this changed over time? Finally, my discussion will also offer a current description of the mechanisms and mechanics of conspiracy transition. That is, a look at what's called the outrage industry, the internet, and social media. And again, note in my conversation, if conspiracy theories transgress by disrupting and rejecting, they also raise hope and optimism of a better future, something new arising out of the ashes of the old. We live at a time in American history when conspiracy thinking colors our thinking of the past and of current events. Conspiracy thinking filters into our daily conversations and our understanding of events. It shapes our ideas, it shapes our worldviews. Now, many believe that this is the result of the attacks on 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York, and the attack on the Pentagon. On that day, a very real conspiracy of approximately 20 people, many more, I'm sure, were involved in this assault. A war waged on the United States. And it caused a profound shock, as you know, across the country and across the decades. But the cry of conspiracy, the power of conspiracy thinking, is not new to our time. It is not of recent origin. For 400 years, Americans have cried conspiracy, such that conspiracy thinking has become an American tradition. Americans have long been conditioned to believe that hidden groups, intelligent, diabolical, and powerful, are bent upon destroying the American experiment. Since our forefathers and foremothers got off the boat, there's been talk and panics of conspiracies, subversion, and plots. Conspiracy theorists believe that these hidden groups have enormous power. They have the means and resources to shape events. They have the means and resources to bend history to their will. They employ wars, riots, recession, depression. They manipulate elections. They finance migrations. They commit crimes, and they spread diseases. All of this in a thirst for power and wealth. Now, this is not unique to the United States. Conspiracy thinking is not unique to the United States. Pretty soon I'll be dancing with the stars. As I was saying, these ideas are not unique to the United States, but to understand conspiracy thinking's lasting power, continuing influence in the United States, we have to look to our core values and our beliefs, because in these core values and in these beliefs, we're going to find the seeds of our obsession with conspiracy. Let me go over a couple of these values and beliefs, core values and beliefs. The first is America's sense of mission, also called American exceptionalism. That is the belief that America has a special role to play on the stage of world history. In the 17th century, our colonial forefathers and foremothers believed that God had sent them on an errand into the wilderness, a mission into what they called the howling wilderness, in order to raise up God's kingdom, in order to create God's new Israel. In the 18th century, American revolutionaries talked about America as a light, a beacon, a model for the rest of the world. And they echoed their grandfathers and grandmothers and talked about a city upon a hill being born in America at the Revolution. In the 19th century, we heard the cry of manifest destiny. God's hand was on our shoulder, pushing us across the rivers, the mountains, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. We designed, and we are destined to create a continental showcase from sea to shining sea. In the 20th and 21st century, our mission has become more secular. But I don't think you can understand America's roles in war in the 20th and 21st century without understanding the concept of mission, and that is to spread liberty, justice, rule of law, and human rights to the four corners of the globe. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, all have been underlined with this mission, if you will, of salvation of the world. Well, doing God's will, doing civilization's work, always awakens the enemies, the evildoers, Satan's minions, the axis of evil, the trial of tyranny, all designed to defeat and defy us. A second American core value, and that is American diversity, our strength as an amalgam of peoples. Yet for the suspicious, for the watchful, this diversity is a curse. For the enemies are within. The enemies have breached the gates. A Trojan horse exists in America, disloyal, subversive, and dangerous. You know, one word absolutely symbolizes this in my mind, and that is the word un-American. The word rolls off our tongue. There are no un-Canadians or un-Swedes or un-Israelis, but we really do understand the expression un-American. A third factor. Nurtured and developed during our colonial years and building with the authority of the federal government in the 20th and 21st centuries is a fear of the growth and concentration of power in its central government. There are only three Englishmen whom Americans can quote by heart: Shakespeare, John Lennon, and Lord Acton. Said Lord Acton, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Americans know by instinct when power is given to the ministers of government, they grow greedy for more power and more authority and more control. They develop, in the words of one United States senator, an arrogance of power. A hunger for more power, a hunger for more authority nibbles away at the rights of the people. Note the anxiety in our holy documents. The Constitution has a written Bill of Rights to make those rights harder to infringe upon. Checks and balances, separation of power, are all tools to deny and defeat tyranny. Look at the Declaration of Independence, second paragraph, where there's an explanation of why the Americans are attempting to break away from the British Empire. I quote Tom Jefferson, "But when a long train of abuses and usurpations evinces, shows a design toward absolute despotism, the Tea Act, the Quartering Act, the Stamp Act, the Intolerable Acts were all seen as part of a plot and a conspiracy to rob Americans of their rights and to impoverish them." The warnings have been sounded for generations. Tom Paine and Tom Jefferson, Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. And you can still hear the warnings today when we talk about the attack on the deep state and we talk about resistance to vaccine mandates. American liberty depends on vigilance. American liberty depends on watchfulness, even suspiciousness. Isn't that the anxiety? Isn't that the anxiety which energizes the members of the Rifle Association and also energizes those who defend so heartily the Second Amendment? Such attitudes, values, and beliefs, mission, fear of diversity, and fear of central authority make fertile ground to raise up repeated crops of conspiracy theories. Note the long history of American conspiracy theories. Note the targets: Salem witches, Native Americans, British ministers, Catholics, Jews, Latter-day Saints, slaves, slaveholders and abolitionists, Wall Street bankers, communists, Japanese Americans, civil rights activists, Muslim Americans, Black Lives Matter demonstrators, and scientists for the Centers for Disease Control are all, among many others, plotters against America. Now, a key turn in American conspiracy theories occurred in the 1930s and 1940s. In the 1930s during the Great Depression and the 1940s during World War II. The shift occurred in the locus or center of power of those who sought to destroy America. The conspiracy theorists found the new enemies. Before, the groups that were on the fringes, on the outside of American society and American institutions, they were the ones who were to be feared. Catholics, Jews, communists, Latter-day Saints. They were seeking to infiltrate the government. They were seeking to infiltrate core American institutions. After the 1930s, coinciding with a great increase in federal power, central government, the enemies were now judged to be within. The enemies had breached the borders and had now moved to take control of the federal government. Outsider groups, disloyal groups, dangerous groups were now eager and in the role of power. The charge now was treason. The focus now was on our leaders. Here we can see the transgressive nature of conspiracy theories. Resistance to, challenging to authorities, democratic institutions, and the republic itself. Thus targeted Franklin Roosevelt, President of the United States in the 1930s and 1940s, who oversaw the expansion of federal authority to attack the Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt was part of a Jewish plot. In fact, his name really wasn't Roosevelt, they said. His name was Rosenfeld, a real key indicator of his allegiance. Allegedly, he had appointed communists to burrow into the government. And allegedly, he had forced the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor in order to save his Russian communist friends from the Germans. Harry Truman was alleged to have made a deal in 1947 with aliens who had crash-landed at Roswell, New Mexico. In exchange for humans for experimentation, the aliens would give us scientific information. Dwight Eisenhower, commander of armies in Europe during World War II, organizer of the Normandy landings in 1944 in France. In the 1950s now, Dwight Eisenhower was a conscious member of the communist conspiracy. John Kennedy, first Catholic to sit in the Oval Office. Kennedy was at the Pope's bidding. Kennedy was part of a Catholic plot to destroy Protestant America. Lyndon Johnson. Johnson had used the FBI and the CIA in league with the mafia and the military-industrial complex to stage a coup and to kill John F. Kennedy in Dallas in 1963. All to stop Kennedy's peacemaking with the Russians, all to continue the war in Vietnam. George Bush I, well, he was accused of planning a new world order. Bill Clinton and his conspiracies, financial and sexual, and desires to cover them up. George Bush II had tricked the United States into the Iraqi war at the behest of the CIA and the oil companies. And Barack Obama, a Kenyan, according to the birther conspiracy, had somehow gotten into the Oval Office. And the question was, whose hidden hands had engineered his rise from Kenya to Washington? And Donald Trump, accused of being in allegiance with Vladimir Putin, and also he having himself a desire to spread conspiracy theories about a deep state conspiracy and a fake news conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists have transgressed by attacking presidents, attacking government, and attacking institutions. And these attacks have helped to erode faith and trust in American institutions. I often quote a poll first taken in 1958 by the Gallup organization. And this poll in 1958 asked the question, do you trust the government to do what is right all or most of the time? And in 1958, 75% of Americans said, I trust the government to do what is right all or most of the time. And since those late days in the 1950s, the number of those who trust the government has withered and withered and withered some more. So by the year 2021, when the poll was again asked, do you trust the government to do what is right all or most of the time, a bare 17% said yes. But it's important to note, it's not simply the government that has seen a loss of trust and faith. Every major American institution has suffered the same fate. The churches, the media, the universities, the courts, science, and medicine. The message delivered is simple. America targeted, America victimized, America betrayed, America attacked, America lost. Who delivers the message? Who are the transgressors? Commentators talk about an outrage industry. Fox News, talk radio, Newsmax, One America News, Breitbart, and InfoWars, creating an echo chamber, an incessantly beating drum, which condemns our leaders, breeds mistrust, and cultivates a loss of faith. They liken themselves to Paul Revere. Paul Revere warning the American people of the crisis and danger ahead of them, warning them that they must mobilize and act, and perhaps even arm, to save the American experiment. The word goes forth. Reject the old messages. Reject the old authorities. Discard the institutions that have allegedly betrayed us. The word is replayed. The word is rebroadcast on the internet and through social media. The internet has made conspiracy theories very easy to access. It accelerates the circulation of conspiracy theories and facilitates the creation of both national and global communities. Click on a website. Enter a world, a universe, a bubble, an echo chamber. The theme is conspiracy. Conspiracy replaces history. Conspiracy explains all current events. This act is self-segregating. People don't go into these onto these websites seeking information. Rather, they're seeking confirmation. There is no dissonance. There are no dissenters. But what there is repetition and repetition and repetition. Researchers have found that men and women who are reinforced become more determined and more extreme in their beliefs, and therefore less likely to change their ideas. Note how the internet intensifies and reinforces transgressive tendencies of conspiracy theories. Messages are anonymous, reinforcing irresponsibility and incivility. Free speech mutates into a repressive club and a weapon. Conspiracy theories and the internet ignore rules of evidence. They subordinate discussion and create slogans. Accurate information is lost in disinformation. Credibility of experts and authorities is ignored, and often these experts and authorities are trolled. Thus, the loss of trust and faith accelerates. Meanwhile, news feeds amplify and reward hateful, divisive, and misleading information. The sole focus is gaining followers. The sole focus is getting likes, all on the back of transgressing behavior. In focusing on the negative aspects of transgression, its assault on norms and values and leaders and institutions, we still must realize that the appeal, the attraction, the power of conspiracy theories comes from its transgressive promises. In targeting the enemy, in railing against oppression, in rejecting current norms and values, conspiracy theories offer a glimpse of a promising future. If only Americans would heed the call, if only Americans would awaken to the danger, conspiracy theories promise and predict a rebirth and a transformation. By rejecting, by challenging a federal government's mandates, multiculturalism, gender fluidity, critical race theory, wokeness, balanced news reports, election results, and globalism, by denying a world alleged to be subverted, immoral, and unclean, Americans can reverse time. They can reclaim an idealized past. They can redress personal failure. They can rebuild America and make it great again. And if that's the case, they can mark a return to something else: the supremacy of Christian values, America first in the world, approved election results, border walls, quiet, subdued minorities, guaranteed American dreams, a patriarchal family, and the myth of a colorblind world. How else to explain the QAnon phenomenon? It's 4 to 5 million believers are convinced that Donald Trump is God's sword and messenger. It is his destiny to defeat the plot of the deep staters, the sex and drug traffickers, the pedophiles, the globalists, the Satan worshipers, the Democrats, and the bankers. Their plot to rule America and create a global new world order. QAnon feeds off Christian evangelical end-time prophecies about the return of Jesus, the rise of the Antichrist, and the final battle with the Antichrist. Thus, QAnon believers predict a coming storm, an arrest of 100,000 deep staters, liberals, and enemies of the people, and then a great awakening, the defeat of evil and the triumph of good, America's return to God, the Bible, and the Constitution. This is not history that we're talking about. This is not the past. This is our reality. September 2020, a poll. Republicans were asked about QAnon beliefs. 1/3 of Republicans said the QAnon beliefs were, quote unquote, mostly true. 1/4 of Republicans said QAnon beliefs, some parts are true. Thus, 56% give tolerance to QAnon. Other polls indicate that 1/3 of Americans believe in some of the key tenets of QAnon. July 29th, 2021, a George Washington University survey. 47% of Republicans agreed with the following statement: that a time will come when patriotic Americans will have to take the law into their own hands. 29% of all Americans agreed with that statement as well. This in a country armed to the teeth. Such conditioning is hard to break. Conspiracy theories offer much to believers. They order the random. They bring clarity. They create identity. They nurture community. They offer purpose. Now you are in on the secret. Now you have the knowledge. Now you know the enemy. Now you have the means to act. In its rejection of the present, conspiracy theories offer hope for the future, a hope for the future that is a promised land of the past. Conspiracy theories, then, are transgressive acts. They destroy faith in American institutions, American leaders, longtime values, and norms. Now opponents are not merely wrong or misguided. They are subversives who plot treason. Patriots simply cannot negotiate with men and women like that. With such enemies, negotiation and compromise, the vital keys to the American experiment, are no longer possible in the resolution of conflict. And in reflecting on what has been accepted, what has been traditional, what has been valued, conspiracy theories offer a new tomorrow. Transgression demands a new world to replace the old. Transgression demands a rebirth that is both personal and national. Finally, and transgression demands a rebirth that insists on the reality of a mythical past. Thank you very much. Brigham and Wendell have deserted me.
All right, testing. Questions, please, comments? Well, I'll jump in first. That was exceptional. I thought that was really brilliant.
Thank you.
How is it possible to close the divide that's taken place, and how?
Well, Wendell, if I knew the answer to that question, I wouldn't be here today. I wonder about those commentators who simply feel that you can use logic and evidence in response to a conspiracy theory, because there's not enough logic or evidence to make that work. I also wonder about those people who believe that they can sit down and find common ground with conspiracy theorists. And I also wonder about those people who shirk any sort of confrontation with conspiracy theorists because they don't want to destroy family harmony or neighborhood harmony. But I think what we have to do, in my mind, those people who worry about the impact of conspiracy theories on American society and American politics, is the first thing we must do is press our leaders. Press our leaders to respond. And I don't simply mean the leaders in Washington, D.C. or politicians. But what I'm talking about is religious leaders. Business leaders. Sports leaders. The leaders of a community. They must be vocal. They must be open. Russell Nelson once said to me in a private meeting, we need to build bridges, not walls. I thought that was a profound statement to make. I wish that kind of statement was made in a vigorous sort of way. That needs to be done. And we've also got to basically start to abandon some of the things we love a great deal, and that's social media. Because the only way social media tech CEOs will hear us is by a loss of revenue. Okay, I think that's important. And finally, I believe that we can't shirk the responsibility as Americans to respond and confront conspiracy theorists. So my small part in this is talking about conspiracies, talking about it, educating people, but primarily educating them about the dangers of conspiracy theories. And that, to me, is a start. Will it work? I hope heavens, because I'm worried. I am sincerely worried. When we live on a troubled planet, when we live in a troubled world, and this is our focus, which is dividing us, separating us, enhancing disunity in the face of challenges, I'm speechless. You know, this generation and the next generation are going to confront such major challenges that they can't be bothered by conspiracy theories nipping at their knees and legs.
Questions, you guys?
Why do you think it is that like 99%? Why do you think it is that like 99% of every single conspiracy theory pretty much loops back to anti-Semitism? And just, it's the Jews.
I don't think it's 99%.
Pretty much.
But you see, well, you know, well, let's ignore the number then, okay? There are conspiracy theories that dredge up what I call the usual suspects, and that's the Jews. Jewish people have faced a variety of challenges over the last several millennia. One is the idea that Jews represent a counterforce to Christianity, that Jews were tarred and blackened by their resistance to Jesus, that they killed Jesus, and therefore were an immoral people. That anti-Semitism was then fortified in the 19th century with a racial anti-Semitism. And that anti-Semitism was based on the idea that Jews were somehow different as a race or a people, and that they had certain nefarious and nasty traits and behaviors which made them a threat to the Christian world. So it's that combination of religious and racial antagonism and bigotry that has fueled anti-Semitism in this world. But I look at a variety of conspiracy theories, whether the assassination of John Kennedy, the Iraqi War, the New World Order, and don't find many, many Jews populating the problem in that direction.
So, in my mind, when I think of a conspiracy theorist, I think of a certain demographic, perhaps a certain race or educational background or even generational background. Are there statistics that reinforce that, or is it like we should all be on our guard and make sure that we understand how to evaluate sources and think about our thinking?
I have not seen demographic data that supports a particular group's adherence to conspiracy theories. There's no gender divide that I've seen. There's no educational divide that I've seen. There's no racial divide that I've seen. My argument is that the most important predictor of conspiracy theory belief is those who have faith in the federal government or institutions and those who do not. Those who believe that the system is broken, those who believe that the system has betrayed them, those are the people who, when they hear a secret, begin a rumor. So that is my understanding that I've seen so far. Okay? There are some people who say, well, if you believe in one conspiracy theory, you believe in many others. I don't find that to be the case either. Okay? But what, to me, has been the constant issue with the people I've interviewed, the research I've looked at, is those people who have lost faith. The system doesn't protect me. The system is not my friend. The system does not support me. Those are the people who look for alternative authorities, alternative elites, and that's where our conspiracy theorists come in.
So it appears to me, as I've been thinking about it and discussing this with my students, that one of the issues that keeps surfacing is the issue of trust. And you had mentioned that for someone who is enveloped with conspiracy thinking, that no amount of empirical data from traditionally trusted sources is going to work to dislodge a person, right, from a conspiracy theory. And it appears that a lot of it comes down to this question, well, to two concepts, trust and patience.
And what was the second one?
Patience.
Patience.
Right? So engaging in a conversation, in order to either unravel or understand conspiracy thinking, it requires a kind of sustained conversation to identify sources of information, how people process information, right? How they utilize sources, et cetera, et cetera. And our environment just doesn't lend itself to that kind of patience, right? Social media is fragmentary, right? It's not intended to convey information, to provoke a response, right? And then there's the trust side, where there's a kind of systemic mistrust that people have of authorities, and which perpetuates conspiracy theories and leads to further tension and violence because there's just a lack of communication. So there's mistrust between people who engage in conspiracy thinking and those who don't, and a mistrust on those who are who do practice conspiracy thinking in traditional source of information. So there's no common basis to even begin a conversation. I just wonder what your comments are on that.
I want to illustrate that point in a conversation I had yesterday with I would say, conspiracy theorist. Not a professional conspiracy theorist, somebody who's painting my house. We were disagreeing on something about Joe Biden and that he was mentally ill and he was being controlled by other forces. And I said, all right, well, let's start by agreeing on sources, okay? And I said, so what I'm going to bring to this conversation is I read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Salt Lake Tribune, the New Yorker magazine, and the Atlantic. And he said, oh, okay. And I said, what about your sources? And he says, well, Breitbart and now it's just let me make one up. But Breitbart and OAN. And I said, well, what about Fox News? Maybe we can compromise on CNN and Fox News in some way. And his response was, Fox News, that's left wing. And I thought, wow, okay. And then I mentioned another one which I thought was conservative, the National Review, a conservative magazine. And he said, they're communists. And so I really appreciate the importance of patience. But I basically stopped the conversation because I said, you know, we are not going to get anywhere. We can't even agree on the kinds of sources that are legitimate to use in this kind of conversation. And so, you know, I've been in education 45 years. And I believe in the importance of education. I'm becoming less and less a devotee of education when I can't even get on the same page. So we can disagree on that same page, but we can't even find the same page at this point. You comment about and patience. You know, for somebody who has no patience at all, and I feel that's an American trait. You know, we really don't believe in the past. We really try to get through the present, and we only can see our eyes on the future. Okay, so I hope we can develop a trait of patience. But to me, the real thing is how many Americans believe that the federal government or the churches or medicine or science has betrayed them. Has betrayed them. And, you know, I was talking to my class last week about this, which was the difference between getting polio vaccine in the 1950s and dealing with the vaccines today. And I was indicating that we just lined up in school for the sugar cube or the shot. Nobody asked any questions. We believed in science. We believed in medicine. And today, as you know, there's some disagreement about science and medicine. So my big questions are, how do we restore faith and trust in our institutions? And I'm not sure I have an answer at this point to that.
There's some, sorry, thank you. Some great questions online as well. Liam asked several here, so I'll just read them off, and then he says, are we supposed to treat conspiracy theories as lost causes? How do we help them realize what they're saying might be untrue? And we've kind of gone over some of that, but are we supposed to put unequivocal trust in the government? Isn't it dangerous to completely trust an institution? That's Liam.
Okay, let me start with that second one. I'm a product of the 1960s, okay? And anybody who lived through the 1960s lost a great deal of faith and trust in the federal government, particularly over the war in Vietnam, okay? I am skeptical to the height. I do not believe anything on its face. I don't believe on anything unless I have evidence to support it. So I believe in a healthy skepticism. I think every student, every American should have a healthy skepticism about government, about institutions. That's what I call liberty. That's what I call freedom. But there's a line between healthy skepticism and downright disbelief. And that's the line that's so difficult to negotiate. And when will you repeat that first part again?
Yes. Do we treat them, all conspiracy theorists, as lost causes? And how do we help them realize what they're saying might be untrue?
Well, I hope Liam can help me with that one. Let me give you an example. So I was talking to a Kennedy assassination conspiracist who was absolutely convinced that John Kennedy was gunned down in a conspiracy. And in the 1990s, one of the things the Clinton administration did was say, we're releasing all the Kennedy assassination information. It's all been basically top secret. We are making it public. And I went to this person and I said, well, now all the information is out. You can make a judgment about conspiracy, non-conspiracy. And his response was, oh, that's what they want you to believe. Okay? There's still a file cabinet, a 3-straw or 4-straw file cabinet sitting in the Pentagon, which has the crucial information we need, and it will never be released. So I don't know how you find common ground with that. I don't know. And people who say, well, in the past, this happened, and this happened, well, you know, there are many instances of federal secrecy and federal connivance, if I can use that word. So I can't dispute his antagonism or his animosity about that. But I don't know the answer, because many of the people I've talked to who are conspiracy theorists, they ain't going to change. I always start a conversation with this. What information do you need to help you change your mind? And the response always is, there is no information that would help me change my mind, because I know the truth.
All right. This is Anna. Is it possible for a conspiracy theory to be helpful, productive, or are they consistently transgressive?
Well, I want to make the point, and I want to emphasize this. When I talked about transgression, I talked about the negative part of transgression, but I've also indicated this positive part of transgression. And this positive part of transgression is the idea, if you believe in this theory, if you follow it and act on it, there is a rebirth coming. There is a new America. The old expression used to be, let's just throw out the rascals. The institutions are fine, the government is fine. If we throw out the rascals, everything changes. That there is a redemption. There is a rebirth, a renaissance possible. What's happened now is it's not simply the rascals, it's also the institutions that are problematic.
I've got one last one from Shayla. I know we're about out of time, but this is a great question. How to deal with conspiracy theories at the university when faculty is being judged on the basis of being liked by the majority of their students? How to appeal to our leadership here as well?
Well, do I even want to enter that little troubled waters? I didn't realize there was a conspiracy theory about that at the Utah Valley University. Perhaps you should explain that one to me, Wendell.
I'm sure that I've had students that are interested in these conspiracy theories, and I don't know exactly how to deal with it.
I have rarely been in administration in my 45 years because I don't like administrators. And this goes back to the 1960s. I was in a graduate student union. We were seeking to get 10 more cents per hour. Don't laugh. 10 more cents per hour in regard to the hours we worked. And they said no. And these are very liberal people, okay, progressive people who said no. And I remember being on the picket line and doing a strike and this and that. And we finally gave in. We lost because we needed the money to eat. And they made sure that the various hours we were not on classroom, that 10 cents would be deducted. It cost more to deduct the 10 cents administratively than to give us the 10 cents. And that's where I lost faith in, if you will, the conspiracy of administrators to keep the workers down.
Thank you, Alp. That was fantastic.
You're welcome.
We will resume at 1 o'clock, you guys.